right, this is Words About Books. I'm Ben. I am not joined by my co-host Nate. Actually, you know what? This is Words Adjacent to Books. I am Ben. I'm not here with my co-host Nate. I'm here with my wife, Spooky Chy. And we're doing a special recording because Spooky Chy and I recently watched the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And we have talked about at least one of the Five Nights at Freddy's books on this podcast before. Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And Chy had a lot of thoughts coming out of that movie.
As did everyone else as they were leaving the theater.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never been the coolest person in a movie theater before.
Excuse you.
Because I was literally the only person walking out of that theater that did not have like a million like new lore theories and everything. I think we talked about this a little bit before when we talked about the book. I know like a bit of Five Nights at Freddy's lore from being in the same room as you while you're watching the videos. Yeah. I recognized Matt Pat as the waiter.
Oh yeah, that was something that happened.
When the kid sitting near us yelled, "Is that the bite of 2023?" I was like, I get that. I get that joke.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny because it was relevant.
I guess I'll ask you, this is how we'll do this. I'll ask you a series of questions.
Well, first and foremost, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie and want to.
Yeah, and spoiler alert for like all the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff.
Whatever. For Five Nights at Freddy's as a whole, if you don't know anything by now, you're free to look it up however you want. As for the movie is new and different, so spoiler alert. It's going to get...
So a couple of things I think people might need to know, because I think a lot of people listening to the podcast probably will not know as much about Five Nights at Freddy's as you do.
I'm no expert. I'm just a passenger.
Okay. I always do like a little about the author thing on Words About Books.
Mm-hmm.
And the closest thing I can do to an about the author thing about Five Nights at Freddy's is Scott Cawthon.
About the creator.
Yeah, so Scott Cawthon, I believe, is a failed Christian video game maker turned children's horror video game maker.
Yes, and it was a complete fluke that it happened because Scott Cawthon had spent his entire game making career prior to Five Nights at Freddy's mostly trying to make games that at the very least his kids could play, and nobody wanted them. And Five Nights at Freddy's was supposed to be the last one. It was supposed to be his send-off, and I don't know what group was the first one to get a hold of it, but it exploded almost overnight.
Yeah, I mean, it had like the perfect aesthetic. I think that was something that a lot of people gravitated to.
I do think, and Ben and I disagree on this, I do think it did hit some people who grew up with things like Chuck E. Cheese and what was the other one?
Showbiz Pizza.
Yeah,
there.
Showbiz Pizza. And they saw the animatronics and were rightly terrified of them. Like, I was that kid. I didn't like going to Chuck E. Cheese to see the mouse. He was scary. Why is that robot moving and singing at me?
I think I told you my brother maybe has, I don't know, deep fear of mascots.
The mascots, I'm not...
But it all goes along like any like...
But I understand, yeah. It's this thing...
Why don't its eyes move?
Yeah, why is it smiling all the time? Yeah. Why does it... Like, especially for the animatronics, why does your mouth move, but it doesn't move the right way?
So Five Nights at Freddy's, the simplest overview I think I could give is it is a series of horror games that have grown into like VR and all that stuff. But the original premise was essentially you're a security guard at an old abandoned Showbiz Pizza / Chuck E. Cheese type place, and The animatronics are still there, and they move on their own. And if you're not vigilant, they will kill you. Going along with that, there is just mountains and mountains and mountains of lore about the guy who made the animatronics, whether or not they're actually animatronics. There are souls trapped in the animatronics.
And bodies.
And bodies. He killed children. There's this weird like quest for immortality / madness thing going on.
It gets a little...
It grew.
It gets a little like hard to follow if you haven't been following it thus far.
And so when we covered the books, there were 2 or 3 canons in Five Nights at Freddy's. I think when we covered the book, there was the books, which were obviously doing their own thing.
Yeah.
The original series of games, which were doing their own thing. And then I think had just started coming out with the new...
They had just started yet another series of books that was supposed to help make the timeline from Security Breach a little more cohesive. It started to like fill in the rest of the gaps in the universe of Five Nights at Freddy's.
The gaps.
Don't judge me. I know what I said, and I know if anybody is even a little aware of what Five Nights at Freddy's are, the gaps are enormous. And I only said they started to fill in.
So I think Scott Cawthon, I mean, he seems to have been the driving force behind it. I know he got into a little bit of hot water for donating to the Trump campaign.
Yeah,
we don't have to go deep into that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, he played a very like front and center role in Five Nights at Freddy's. Then that came out. A lot of people felt betrayed. There's a huge chunk of like the queer community that's really into this, and he's been supportive of the queer community and charities and stuff. But this Trump thing just really
it came at a really bad time because this also happened over COVID.
Yeah.
So it was like wrong time, wrong place. Had the world not been swallowed by a pandemic, I'm sure it would have been easier for him to navigate. But this was just, I think this was a good enough excuse for him to take a back seat.
The only reason I'm bringing it up is because Scott Cawthon was a big part of the reason this got popular. I think it was his idea to hide things in the code, hide things in HTML pages, take this into like an ARG type place, alternate reality game. And he liked leaving all these little clues around. And I think perhaps he maybe doesn't handle it as masterfully. It seems like whenever other people start to get involved, and they inevitably have to, then we can't keep our stories straight.
I think I'm not going to like quote this. I think Scott Cawthon has come out and said that initially he didn't have a plan for it. The story for Five Nights at Freddy's as a whole sort of came out after the second game was released because he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. Because, like I said, the first Five Nights at Freddy's game was going to be his last. That was him hanging up his game developing.
The old Final Fantasy story, it's called Final Fantasy because that was the last, they ran out of money.
14, 15, 20 games later, here we are.
Yeah.
Like, just like with Five Nights at Freddy's, we're like, 6, 7 games, 8 books, and now a movie in.
Well, so the reason I bring him up more on this than we did in the book episode was because A, somebody else wrote the book, but B, his name is all over the movie.
Oh yeah,
he did pretty much everything except direct and star. He's the screenwriter, he's the concept writer, he's the scenario writer, producer.
The nerd in me wants to go back and rewatch the movie to see if he like appeared in the background somewhere.
I don't know what he looks like.
I do.
That'll conclude our About the Author section for now. Just keep in mind a guy named Scott Cawthon exists. So the movie seems to be doing its own canon. It's starting from scratch. It's not really... There are certain pieces to the Five Nights at Freddy's lore There's the child murderer, the animatronics, the kids' souls and bodies trapped inside the animatronics, and the security guard.
Yeah.
Those are the key pieces that I think are still there.
Yeah.
So this movie has been going. There have been rumors of this movie forever.
Yeah, for like since before the COVID times.
Yeah. So the movie stars Josh Hutcherson
PETA.
of PETA fame from the Hunger Games. And some girl I've never seen, some kid, she was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the cop would be the next biggest co-star.
I've never seen her
I don't know
before.
who she is either. So
the big name drop is Matthew Lillard.
Matthew Lillard was in it.
He's my baby.
I like Matthew Lillard. And he was playing Matthew Lillard. They gave him so much room to just chew scenery. Like,
and chew it he did.
So in the Five Nights at Freddy's video games, the security guard is you. He doesn't have a background.
Yeah.
You're just somebody who has taken a job guarding a pizza place. It didn't really need to be more complicated than that. But for this, I'd say like the first half hour of the movie, you don't even see Freddy Fazbear's Fun Time, Happy Place, whatever it's called.
No, you get more of like the character development of the security guard, which is it's nice, it's needed for the movie.
I sense a hesitancy in your complimenting.
Yeah, so in the lore that has been built outside of the movie, you come to learn that you as the security guard you find out you're actually very closely tied to the crimes and mysteries surrounding the animatronics and the owner of the pizza place. In the movie, you find out that there's a connection, but it's a very loose, coincidental connection.
So I'm interested to know how you feel about this. I'll give like a quick plot thing. So you find out that there's a security guard, Josh Hutcherson, Mike, I think is his name. Mike Schmidt. Mike has a sister named Abigail.
Abby, yeah.
Abby. She seems to be neurodivergent, like autism spectrum. She struggles to communicate with words. She draws a lot of pictures. They are down on their luck, running out of money. Mike keeps blowing job after job. We find out Mike experienced a very traumatic event when he was a kid that he never recovered from. His brother was snatched and never seen again, presumably murdered.
Snatched from the middle of the woods.
Well, like a state park type situation.
Yeah.
Like a campground.
Yeah.
And, he never got over it. And he is into this pseudo-psychic dream theory research where he has subscribed to a theory that your brain perfectly records all the information your senses have ever taken in.
It just needs to be...
It's just difficult to access. But through lucid dreaming, basically, you can put yourself back in any given memory and relive it as if you were there. And he's trying to achieve this to get a look at the person who kidnapped his brother. And he thinks he sees somebody snatching a kid at the mall where he's a security guard. It is actually just a parent yelling at their kid.
Probably for wandering off.
And he beats the hell out of the guy, gets fired.
Yep.
He's got to get another job. And this is how he's going to wind up at Freddy's. He winds up with career counselor Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, I don't remember what his name was supposed to be. That's just Matthew Lillard.
We're going to go with Bill? They can't tell you his name or everybody's going to know what he is.
Well...
Or he could go under an assumed name, I guess.
I think that's what he was doing, was using an assumed name.
Yeah. He sees Mike's name. He sees Mike's last name. And his whole tone changes from like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get you a job to, I got a job for you.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, pay sucks, but the hours are worse.
I love the way he delivered that. Every time I see Matthew Lillard on screen, I just fall in love with him even more. It's just like, can you Can you just mug at me? Just.
Did you really call the police?
You missed your sorry ass.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
This is a book podcast, so like people don't know as much about like our horror movie
Obsession.
Yeah, like they're not going to know that when we see Matthew Lillard, we think Scream and 13 Ghosts and just all of his overacting. He was Shaggy from Scooby-Doo for a while. I think he was the one that took over after Casey Kasem died for a bit. Mm-hmm. Or was there another Shaggy in between? I can't remember.
I don't know.
He played it in the live action movie. He played Shaggy and then he just took over.
I think he took it after his time in the live action movies, but I think there was somebody in between.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on like the Dragula, like he's just deep into like the campy horror community.
He's a babe.
But I think most people probably don't even know who Matthew Lillard is.
No, like I feel like the people who know who Matthew Lillard is are in love with Matthew Lillard just as much as I am. And it's like literally you either know him and love him or you don't know him, obviously.
If you know who Barbara Crampton is, I guarantee you know who Matthew Lillard is.
Barbara Crampton.
Barbara Crampton was in every B horror movie. She's in Chopping Mall and
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, she's been in everything. But yeah, so you see Matthew Lillard and you're like, is this a cameo? But see, this is for me, I was metagaming. I was like, he's got to be an important character because he got like top billing.
Yeah, there's no like I remember seeing so much talk about Matthew Lillard being in it that like I wasn't satisfied just seeing
No, he
him
can't just be the career counselor.
Yeah,
that's lame.
I was like, there's something's going on. Why are you here?
To give him lines and everything, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So Mike takes this job at Freddy's and hijinks ensue. So he starts dreaming at Five Nights at Freddy's. This is like the whole first half of the movie before like the animatronics even come into play.
Before they come into play directly with our main character.
So there's a whole, and we were talking about, you got to go through this, I guess. There's a whole subplot where in addition to not having any money, in addition to him needing to take this crappy job overnight while he has a kid with special needs at home, they also have to deal with an evil aunt trying to get custody of the girl. And this evil aunt subplot
It's a little much. It's a little dumb.
Like, it doesn't go anywhere. And it doesn't, like, here's my question. I have so many questions. The aunt, she wants the kid. Why again? For the check from the state?
Yeah, there's supposed to be...
The check from the state that they can't even come close to living on? And she's already rich?
Yeah, she's greedy. That's the point.
But she's not going to get any... Like, it's literally not even worth the time. Like, the kid costs more to keep alive than the check they give you. That's the whole thing. Like, her motivation is so weird.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't... Like, I could buy it if it went somewhere. I was like, okay, she's terrible. Whatever.
Well, I do also think they needed something to, like... No, I guess they really didn't need her. Like, I was going to say they needed her for, like, something to show their willingness to, like, the animatronics' willingness to kill. But, like, by that point in the movie, they've already done it. Like, several times. Without question.
Yeah. So the aunt is trying to get the sister away from Mike. Presumably just for the money. The sister doesn't want to go. I thought a more realistic direction to take that in would be trying to take the sister simply because Mike isn't qualified to raise a child. But then the aunt isn't evil. And she...
Yeah.
Like, the plot line I would have gone with is the aunt genuinely has the interests of the child at heart. And throughout the circumstances of the film, we see Mike grow into the kind of character. She sees Mike make a sacrifice that makes her change her mind that, no, he is the person she should stay with.
Yeah.
But that's not where they go. She's just evil. She's just an asshole.
Yeah.
And she hires these goons to sabotage Mike's job. And Mike's job is to keep people out of Freddy's at night, and nobody guards it during the day.
Yeah, that part really, like, I don't care what they were trying to do there. That just didn't make any sense because, like, why? Okay, so they break in the animatronics. They kill everybody and whatever. They don't even address that. Like,
No, I was wondering about that.
but then
I was like, well, because okay, so here's let me go through like the whole flow of events here. So she hires these goons to wreck up Freddy Fazbear's Pizza while Mike's not even on duty, and then they do that. They start smashing it up, and the animatronics come to life and they kill the intruders.
Yeah, like don't mess up my home.
And then the cop shows up. She showed up once before to be like, "Did you meet them?"
She showed up at Freddy's while Mike was working. Now that Mike is off the clock and this thing has happened, she shows up at his front door and is like, "Hey, I found your sleeping medication, and also some goons broke in after you left. How dare you?"
So they're trying to set it up so that Mike befriends this cop lady, and she seems to know about the pizza place. She's the classic horror movie harbinger. The one that tells you don't go into those woods. People die in those woods. Mm-hmm. She's like, have you met them? The animatronics. Be careful at Five Nights at Freddy's. Be careful at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza because...
The one who you look at and you're like, all right, the second you opened your mouth, I knew you were connected to this.
Yeah.
Please tell me how.
Well, okay, the second she opened her mouth, I knew she was connected to this because she said, "Hi, I'm Vanessa," and the theater just went nuts.
Yeah, that too.
And I was like, the hell's Vanessa?
It's in the movie, to compare the movie to the game canon, it's a story-breaking move. But
we're not ready for that yet.
No, not yet.
So it's Vanessa. If you know Five Nights at Freddy's, I assume you too are going like, "Oh my God," right now. I don't know that. So it's Vanessa. Okay. Mm-hmm. Friendly security guard / romantic interest. That's what I'm thinking. Or friendly cop / romantic interest.
Yeah.
And they're trying to say, so Mike has been sleeping on the job. He takes these sleeping pills to try to do his dream magic.
Yeah.
At Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm sorry, I keep calling it that. Like that's the name of the place. At Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he finally has some success. He sees these weird kids.
Yes.
They have the exact, there's the exact number of kids and they're wearing the exact colors.
Well, there's not the exact number of kids. There are 5 kids in the dream, and you only ever see the 5th one's animatronic suit whenever they take Abby from her house to Freddy's, as Mike is already there. To put it simply, Golden Fredbear only makes one appearance at the end of the movie, but you see the child's spirit.
Is Golden Fredbear different from Fredbear?
Yes.
Oh, that
Golden Fredbear is from the same generation, so to speak, as
But Golden Fredbear is the blonde kid.
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that went right over my head.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed they didn't do more with like just having the Golden Fredbear suit just chilling somewhere, because that's his whole point. In the game universe and in the books, Golden Freddy was the first Fredbear who came alongside of Golden Bonnie, who William Afton, the big bad guy, he wears that suit. So that means, that makes the Golden Fredbear suit the first one you guys stuffed with a child.
You guys have your Pepe Sylvia boards out and you're keeping track of this, I trust, at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
just follow along. Get good.
Okay. So I've been kind of harsh on some of the movie up to this point, but I like the dream stuff.
I liked.
I think that blonde kid is fucking creepy.
Oh yeah,
he was
the
a
blonde kid
good.
was very creepy.
He was a good actor.
He did a very good job.
Yeah.
In the negotiation scene.
He doesn't have many lines, but
I would have caved because I wanted him to stop looking at me.
No, the kids are creepy. I like that he has the dreams, and that he communicates with the spirits of the kids in his dreams.
Yep.
I thought that was neat. I wonder what you think about that as a mechanic, because obviously the security guards of Five Nights at Freddy's, as you play the games, you can never talk to the robots except in the new games, right?
No, in the new games, I believe it's in Security Breach is the only one where there's any kind of like, I'm trying to think because it's such a mess. It really is such a mess trying to follow like all of the stuff that is out there for Five Nights at Freddy's that is canon, that is fan made turned canon.
Fanon. So as a Five Nights at Freddy's old head, I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, do you like the idea that he communicated directly with the spirits, or do you not like that?
For the movie, I like it because the security guard, I feel like there has to be some kind of motivation more than, oh my god, the animatronics are alive.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of connection and motivation between the animatronics and the security guard.
Yeah, because the original Five Nights at Freddy's gameplay loop is basically just a recipe for jump scares.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't work as a movie. It works fine for what it is as the games, but it doesn't work as a movie.
No, Five Nights at Freddy's wouldn't make a good regular jump scare movie. It needs some kind of like suspense, as well as I think they could have leaned in more to the possession aspect. They could have done a lot more with the animatronics because there's so much they could have done. Even on his first night there, it could have just been like, oh my god, did that just move across, like not even across the,
or they just
the
changed
dining
position
area.
even, like it was facing forward and now it's facing the camera.
Yeah, like
I would have, it was missing a bit of that.
There's such little interaction with what is supposed to be the title characters of the movie that it's really disappointing that you only really get 2 big scenes with them.
So Mike is taking these pills to force himself to sleep more, to force himself to navigate the dream world, to look for his brother. That's very Lovecraftian. There's a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft stories about people who specifically do journey through dreams and stuff. And they're kind of implying that the dreams are this like astral space where souls can communicate directly with one another.
Well, you would be interested to know that that doesn't surprise me, because one of the things that I don't mention to you as I talk about like the tangled web of lore that is Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't mention Remnant that often because it is all of the metal from the endoskeletons from the other animatronics melted down, where it is all one mash of angry mixed up souls. And it's just such a mess to try to talk about because some things have it, some things don't, some things they've recreated it, but it's like exploding on them. And it's just magic metal.
You know, there's just something about Five Nights at Freddy's. The idea that all of this like arcane magic dealing with immortalities and souls, that all of this is playing out in a Chuck E. Cheese. That's just, there is something compelling about that to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. So Mike takes these sleeping pills. So the goons smash up the place, and the cop finds the sleeping pills and the place smashed up and the door unlocked. And she's using that to insinuate that Mike is going to jail.
She shouldn't. She never said she found the door unlocked. what they show in the movie is the intruders breaking the lock of the back like dock door, and Mike clearly left out the front door, locking it behind him.
Yeah. So our point is Mike doesn't really like, so this is what I didn't understand. So Vanessa says something like, you won't tell me what's going on here because once I file this report, there's nothing I can do. And if a cop ever tells you that, you get a lawyer. They're lying. They're allowed to lie. Never talk to a cop without a lawyer, especially not Vanessa, because everybody in the theater gasped when her name was mentioned. So I know something's up.
She's a bad cop. Don't trust Vanessa.
So Mike and Vanessa go sit by the town creek or something. They go to a second location, and he tells her his tragic backstory of how his brother got snatched, and he has this weird theory about dreams, and he's trying to find his brother in the dreams, and he can, he sees people at Freddy Fazbear's, and it's the first progress he's ever made, and he just feels like he needs to do it. And she's like, look, when you're at Freddy Fazbear's, you stay alert.
And she doesn't tell you why.
No.
That pisses me off.
Well, that's movies. I mean, like that. Look, I could tell you the whole story. Like we could sit here, sit down, pull up a mic, have a podcast. Let me tell you all the lore about this pizza place. So everybody in movies only has exactly one scene to talk, and we can't waste time on anything that's not necessary. This is where I was kind of hoping the movie would start to pick up, but this is also where the movie starts to get weird. The kid, Abigail, she seems to, and I don't love this. I'm getting kind of sick of this. The kid with a neurodivergence is not just neurodivergent.
They're also psychic.
They're psychic. They perceive the world differently than you do.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, for this movie, it's fine. Like I know they're not trying to break new ground in the horror genre. It's a trope that works. Kids are creepy. I get it. Whenever somebody talks to imaginary friends and stuff, it's scary. Especially, maybe that's just because I've seen so many horror movies. Maybe it's not scary. Maybe it's just normal part of life.
So I tried having imaginary friends when I was a little kid. I didn't get it because I don't like the idea of just talking to air.
Okay, Shy.
I would rather just admit that I'm talking to myself.
The kid goes to Freddy's, and she is able to perceive the children inside the animatronics, and they play with her.
Yeah.
And there is a heartwarming scene where Vanessa and Mike and Abigail and the animatronics,
they have a fort building montage.
They build a fort, they play around, they do all this stuff. And I was just like, so as a civilian sitting in the theater, I was just eating my popcorn going like, what is the tone of this movie? Like, in all my experience with Five Nights at Freddy's, now, I have understood this about Five Nights at Freddy's, that the children don't like adults.
Correct.
Because adults remind them of their deaths.
They're supposed to be angry spirits, and every adult they see is supposed to be a threat, and the only adults they ever see are, like, wearing security outfits.
Yeah, which makes sense. I think that's a good story. And when they would see a kid, it makes sense to me that they might not attack in the same way.
Yeah.
But what didn't make sense to me was this happy, fun, playful montage. Like, the spirits of the Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics in this seem almost a little too intelligent.
Yeah, and the thing that confuses that whole idea that they can just communicate openly like that is the fact that later I think it was Mike that said, Abby, you have to draw it. They'll understand it if you draw it. In regards to showing the animatronics what actually happened to them. And
But you've been actually just talking to them this whole time, Mike.
Literally,
Yeah.
you've been, like
this whole time, Mike.
literally,
Yeah.
you've been like the second Mike and Vanessa walked into the room and they saw Abby interacting with the animatronics looked at them like, "Oh, what is this?" And Abby was like, "No, they're fine. They're okay. They're my friends." And if they can understand you then, why do you have to draw it out for them?
Well, this was where I sensed, and this is why I mentioned Scott Cawthon at the beginning, because I wanted to get to this point. Watching the movie, knowing a little bit about Scott Cawthon's background, knowing that he's like a family-oriented guy, he obviously loves his kids, and the whole movie is kind of geared towards like being somewhat safe for kids.
Yeah.
It's a very tame PG-13.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of blood. There's enough violence that I think it's solid.
There's enough like shown violence and implied gore. There is a scene where one of the intruders gets like bitten in half, but they don't show it on screen. They just show like
They show the
silhouette.
shadow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it definitely does not shy away from the idea that people are being killed in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, but it doesn't show you so much that I think most kids would have nightmares from it.
Yeah.
Assuming they're like the appropriate age to like 12 to 14, you know?
Yeah.
It seemed like Scott Cawthon couldn't quite bring himself to make the kids villains.
Well, and the problem is, I think there was a conflict in the writing, because inside Freddy Fazbear's, there is a wall that is supposed to have like a bunch of drawings done by the children that have visited and played there. And I was really happy to see that a lot of them were like directly copied from the game. Like they were like the canonical pictures, and some of them did have story elements. And that is something that is important throughout the series, of depicting thoughts, feelings, and events through the eyes of a child through their drawings. But that's where it's supposed to be like, that's supposed to show that they are sympathetic characters and that there is something wrong, because there's also, I don't know, like they're not like Easter eggs. They're just things that happen during like death screens as they're like loading into like letting you restart it. The animatronics characters will say things, and it's showing you that the children aren't the bad guys. They're being forced to do something they don't want to do. And they were showing them do that in the movie, but they only showed them doing it for like 5-10 minutes.
In the movie, the animatronics never kill anyone who hasn't transgressed. Like the goons who break into the store, though they do not deserve to be executed for it, did commit a wrong against the animatronics.
Well,
they broke into their place and they smashed their stuff.
Then what about the first person in the beginning of the movie?
Oh, that's true. I forgot the first security guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's my thing. So do they kill innocent people or not? In the games, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, in the game, it's they have had a series of killings. Like, they won't tell you that there's been a series of killings, but they imply heavily in like all of the tutorial, the tape guy tapes, that like no one knows what happens to the last so many security guards because the one ran off and the other 3 died or something.
Well, and I think the thing with like a vengeful spirit story is the whole point of a vengeful spirit story is like, have respect for your fellow man, have respect for the dead. Everybody deserves a funeral at the very least. Like everybody deserves final rites or a prayer. And if you don't give people that, they come back as vengeful spirits. That's the idea. So the kids, I can buy, like when you're a vengeful spirit, you're not necessarily aware and sentient and making decisions. your raw cursed emotion.
Yeah.
And these kids are also under the influence of an outside force, which is objectively evil.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. That's the one who killed them.
Yeah.
And so it's weird. Like the story kind of doesn't know how to ramp up to its third act.
Yeah.
The animatronics make a deal with Mike. In his desperation, Mike says he'll give them anything if the kids can show him the face of the man who took his brother. And they do the old, anything. We want Abby. They want his sister.
Yeah.
And in a moment of like
weakness and desperation.
Yeah, he says yes, but he's also implied to be like confused. Like he's in a dream state and he's got dream logic going on. They're showing him his mother talking to him, his father talking to him, like, you can have all this back. We can
they have his little brother talk to him.
Yeah, they have him believing that he literally can rewrite the past.
Yeah.
And when he gets a hold of himself and realizes he's being tricked, he says, no, I'm not giving you Abby.
I take it back. I didn't mean it. He actually said, I didn't mean it.
Yeah. And that's when the animatronics are already on their way to take Abby. And they do kidnap her.
Yeah.
And
that's where Golden Fredbear comes.
Yeah. And he kills the ant.
Yeah.
Which convenient that
yeah.
I knew as soon as the ant died, I was like, are we ever going to talk about the fact that they had a very strained relationship and she got her head cut off inside his house?
Yep. Just like with the intruders dying, they don't talk about it.
It's okay. My girlfriend's a cop. So, and she got her ass kicked too. Same night.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Stabbed by somebody.
The Freddy Fazbear Town Police are not very good at what they do.
No.
So Golden Freddy kidnaps Abby. So the kids. So this is the final act. This is the tension for the final act.
Mm-hmm.
Is we thought the kids were like friendly and safe, and they're just kids who happen to die, unfortunately, and we should maybe be nice to them. But actually, they're not right. They're not safe kids. They don't want the best. They're not Casper the Friendly Ghost. They are cursed spirits, and they're going to turn Abby into a. So they want to kill adults, and they want to make other children like them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, probably should have cut the fort building scene.
Yeah, because they don't give you a whole lot of time to understand how they are like.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think this would have made a better like mini series? Do you think maybe there's just too much here?
It definitely would have been a better miniseries, and they could have followed the weird lore even for Five Nights at Freddy's in a mini series better than they could have in a movie.
I talk about the lore and how crazy things get, but it's like if you watch any of those CW like superhero shows or Buffy the Vampire
Oh my god,
Slayer,
Supernatural has so much weird back lore.
Yeah, like this would be perfect for that.
No, and like it would actually, you would be able to incorporate a lot more of like the extra, like the fluff and stuff that was brought in by the books. You could bring a lot more of that in to make a more cohesive story.
Yeah, if you had like a 24 episode season, you could have like season 1, cover the early lore or even like part of the early lore. And season 2, like he's back. And then, it would be, I was just wondering, because like as I was watching the movie, I was like, was a movie the right call?
I mean, I liked the movie. I would like to know whether it is going to be considered part of the whole canon.
Almost certainly not.
It can't.
Yeah.
It really can't.
Okay, so the end.
This is where it all, like, it was already going to shit, to heck, to hell. It was not going well lore-wise. And then it just exploded.
So, at the end, we see a character even I am familiar with come out. Well, I say familiar. The rabbit one. The golden rabbit. I think there's a blue rabbit, but there's also a gold. I don't know their names.
There's Golden Bonnie, otherwise known as Springtrap.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so There, the rabbit. It's the same rabbit, but just like one of them Super Saiyan.
Golden Bonnie is the original iteration.
Oh my god. Okay.
Along with Golden Freddy.
I don't care. So William Afton comes out in his stupid thing. So we find out throughout the thing, and this is another confusing thing in Five Nights at Freddy's that we talked about in the books. The animatronics are also suits, so you could put a guy inside it, but it can also move independently. And there's a deadly mechanism that makes this possible called the spring lock. And if you move even slightly incorrectly while you're in the suit, it will puncture all your bones and organs.
Yeah.
But if you move correctly...
Also, you have to be wary of like moisture. If you sweat too much or if you get water in it, it'll snap.
So if you're a chi master, you can manipulate one of these suits and it will give you super strength. And William Afton has that training. And he's also Matthew Lillard. And Matthew Lillard, William Afton, Golden Bonnie comes out. And he's like, you just couldn't leave it alone, could you, Mike? And he's being really abusive towards the kids. He's telling them they're nothing, that they need to work for him. Like he's just being as abusive as you can without being really triggering. Like he doesn't go over the line, but they're heavily implying that.
Yeah.
And we find out Vanessa is his daughter.
Yeah.
And she is trying to help Mike save Abby, but William Afton's going to kill him. But then Mike, they manage to damage him. But then Mike is like, you got to get the animatronics to help us, because Mike is so injured at this point from trying to free Abby and fighting all the characters.
Let's also mention in his last dream with all of the children's spirits.
Oh, you want that?
he got his ass beat. They just did just running knifing at him somehow, and I loved it. But also I was like, damn, fuck these kids.
You know what it reminded me of, and no one's going to get this reference? The 2000 DVD release of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yep, I don't get it.
Yeah, there is a scene. So it's a musical, right? And they're just basically filming the musical as if it were a film. Mm-hmm. But the effects and stuff are all very theater effects.
Yeah.
So there is a scene with Trial by Pilate where Jesus is lashed, 39 times. Mm-hmm. And each of they have these characters run out and slash him, and there's a lash sound effect, and each character has a blood capsule in their hand, and they crunch it and rub blood on the guy playing Jesus and then run away. And that's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so he got his ass beat by a bunch of kids in his dreams. So of course it left real world marks on him. Yeah,
well, they've established that. They're doing something I like the dream thing. It seems like an interesting, and maybe based on what you're telling me, it's not an addition from this movie, but it's something that is part of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore.
There are things that take place on I'll say the metaphysical plane, not quite the dream plane. Not they do virtual reality stuff, and in the Five Nights at Freddy's video game and book lore, they do talk about essentially infecting one's body with whatever has made Snaptrap, the bad guy, go crazy. Yeah,
that's a real name. That's not
Snaptrap.
That's not just something I misremember when.
No, you're right. I think I'm wrong.
Claptrap is from Borderlands.
There's a lot of things going on in my head right now, and I'm not good with names. The one thing I'm consistently bad at is names.
Snaptrap and Snoozlydorf and
Springtrap.
That sounds right. Yeah. Anyway, girl draws a picture, reveals to the kids that Golden Bonnie is not their leader, but is in fact the man who killed them. They turn on him. They spring all the spring locks in his suit, and he dies in the most painful way possible before shouting the corniest line I may have ever heard in a horror movie, and that's saying something.
I always come back.
I always come back. And everybody...
That's what he says in the game.
Everybody in the theater cheered, so it obviously did its job. That was just something I didn't like, but it's not for me.
And he didn't die. They showed him quite clearly still alive.
They showed him twitching, but that doesn't mean anything when the suits can move from ghosts.
Their bodies are still inside there.
That doesn't mean anything. Their bodies are skeletons now.
William Afton's still alive.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay.
None of it makes sense.
I've done that to Nate. I think I did that during the Jeff the Killer episode. Every time, like Nate does this thing where anytime there's a hospital scene, that's when it all falls apart for him because nobody ever gets them right. You can say the most ridiculous shit about any other aspect of life, but if you get a hospital wrong, Nate will pounce on it.
That sounds about right.
So yeah, the tone of the movie was a little dissonant for me. I didn't know if I was supposed to be like in Five Nights at Freddy's the games. I know you're supposed to be both afraid of the kids and sympathetic towards them.
Yeah.
In this one, it almost seemed like the kids were the good guys. Like it almost seemed like a Saturday morning cartoon version of Five Nights at Freddy's. You know how they used to do that with all the movies that came out for adults? Like Ghostbusters had a Saturday morning cartoon. Back to the Future had a Saturday morning cartoon.
Didn't Gremlins have a Saturday morning
cartoon? I think so, yeah. Beetlejuice had a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, Beetlejuice did.
And so like with Ghostbusters, Slimer becomes a friendly mascot. And
yep, he became best boy for some reason.
And like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was also kind of a Godzilla-like hero sometimes. Like he could be deployed.
They made a Godzilla
cartoon with Godzuki. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was bad.
I mean, they all kind of were going back to it. I had all the toys. I loved them as a kid, but they were all pretty bad. But this kind of reminded me of that. Like they took something that was very dark, a little too dark for kids, but just too marketable to pass up.
I mean, it was already mass marketed to literal children. And like Five Nights at Freddy's, even though it is...
This seemed like a very family-friendly Five Nights at Freddy's.
I've been thinking about this for a while, and there are aspects of it that might not be like entirely child-friendly, but on the whole, like I think Five Nights at Freddy's is good for kids that are like at least like 11, like 10 or 11.
Well,
because
I'll tell you, I agree with you actually, because the Saturday morning cartoon thing, the reason I make that comparison is because I have though they are bad, this is one of those like, yes, that's not necessarily a good show. I love it. And if that Beetlejuice cartoon, like if there was a marathon of that on, I would watch it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a fondness for them. And I kind of want to like this movie, and I kind of hope it does well, because I don't want it to be just a failed experiment and never goes anywhere.
In all of the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff that I have, like, for all of the games that I've played and, like, the books that I've read or tried to read, and all of the, like, extra media stuff that I've engaged with, it is very much, like, a good entry level if you want your kid to get into horror or mystery solving, because it's easy on the violence. It never shows like too much outright violence. A lot of it is usually implied through either clever silhouettes or like
a hand dragging down a closed door window.
Yeah. Like there's a bloody handprint. Oh my gosh. But it's like, that is like 70% of the blood you'll see throughout the entire game. Like, there aren't that many times in the main world of Five Nights at Freddy's that actually use an explicit amount of blood. There are things that have been made by fans that might use a little bit more. I can think of some of the what is it called? It's like the VHS style
the analog horror.
Analog horror. There are a lot of analog horror videos that have come out that show a little to a lot more of the blood and gore side of Five Nights at Freddy's, but even then they still hide it behind like a pixelated wall. I can think of one image offhand right now where they were showing in a quote unquote training video how to clean out one of the suits, and they had a still of like they made up a picture of a suit and they pixelated a giant area where they made it look like they were implying a lot of blood and gore, but it was still behind like a mosaic of nothing.
So I think we were like, one of the first things we said as we were driving home from the theater was would have been a solid episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh yeah.
So I do kind of think like as a gateway horror movie to kids, when we were in the theater, it was all ages, but there were some little kids
Yeah.
who probably were too young to be at a PG-13 horror movie. But I don't think they would have had nightmares. I think it was probably...
I don't think they would have any worse nightmares than they would if they had seen one of the scarier episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps.
Yeah, like you remember the Are You Afraid of the Dark with the thing in the pool? And they had to put like orange stuff in the pool to make it visible. And then when it's finally... Oh man, that's obviously stuck with me.
No, I remember I watched more Goosebumps than I did Are You Afraid of the Dark. I was actually...
You're just that right amount younger than me.
Yeah, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a little too scary for me at the time. And now it's like I wish I could go back and watch it, but it's kind of hard to find, and I don't have that kind of patience anymore.
You gotta get your Paramount Plus subscription, I think. That's where that one hides. Anywho, so where would you like to see this go? Do you want another Five Nights at Freddy's movie? Do you want it to be its own thing? Do you want the return of Mike and Abby?
I didn't like the child character was fine. I think I want so much more of the lore to be in the movie, but I also understand that like the movie needs to be able to appeal to a larger audience than just the fans.
Well, and here's the thing with a movie or a book that differs from the highly interactive nature of a video game is with a movie, you just have to show people things. With a book, you only have the text on the page. You can't hide things in the code. You can't hide it behind like a series of steps perfectly executed that already puts you in a mood to be scared.
Yeah.
Like, it does help to have you need characters you're attached to right from the get-go, not just figures in history to research.
The Five Nights at Freddy's lore can be presented in movie form, but it would have to be done a lot differently. This is not a movie that is canon for the fans. This is more a movie that is an appreciation of the fans. Like, here are things that are big and important to the overarching story, but we don't have that kind of time to put it into a movie.
So do you want another movie?
I don't want a sequel to this movie.
You don't want the sequel? You don't want Vanessa and Mike coming back to fight more animatronics?
I don't want like a buddy cop Five Nights at Freddy's. In my opinion, like if I were to remake this, whether it be a movie or a miniseries, I would actually start with like the proper, I guess you could call it the historical timeline of like you start at the creation of Freddy's with William Afton and his partner, whose name I can't recall, and show William Afton's descent into madness as he starts like killing children and his own children die.
You know what? I'm gonna throw this out into the ether. A Mike Flanagan style Netflix series. Mike Flanagan's the Hill House guy, where it's split like Hill House between the past and the present. You have the adults and you have the kids, and then like they're going back to Freddy's after all these years.
That's kind of how the Silver Eyes is, and I would totally be about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Scott Cawthon, if you're ever looking for somebody to consult, my wife is available, and as
I'm the ideas shy. I'm not the planning shy.
as Shy's manager, I will negotiate a reasonable rate.
Benjamin.
I don't have a rubric for films. So in general, like 5-star gut feeling, what would you give Five Nights at Freddy's the movie?
I'm gonna have to go with
Let's make it simpler too. On a horror scale, specifically against other horror movies. So we're not like no Goodfellas, no Scorsese, like nothing artsy.
I'm gonna have to give it a solid 3 out of 5. I want to say 3.5 because I'm biased. I can't say 2.5 because I think it is worth watching. It's there. The hardcore nerd in my brain is like, no, this is terrible. It has nothing to do with the timeline. This is stupid. And the rest of me is just like, shut up, nerd.
I was gonna say
appreciate it.
I'm also on a 3 out of 5. As somebody who does not know what they're missing. And I told you as soon as we got in the car, I was like, you sound like me when I got out of the Lord of the Rings movies.
I'm glad I didn't have to endure that.
Yeah, I've gotten better over the years. I watched Dune and I was totally fine with it. Mm-hmm. But this is part of having something you really like that's just simply too big to be contained in a movie.
Yeah, and that's the problem is like Five Nights at Freddy's has a lot going on.
Yeah.
And considering how long it's been out and how messy things have gotten in trying to keep track with everything, like a movie is not going to bring this all together.
But I would watch a sequel. It was a fun night at the movies. I mean, it seemed like everybody that was there with us had a decent time.
If they made a sequel, I would see one.
It's not the Five Nights at Freddy's that you love.
Yeah. Like, I don't begrudge it anything. I understand that, like, the things that happened in the movie cannot stand, like, in accordance with its own timeline, the movie cannot exist. I think this is going to be a problem that a lot of people who are, like, who know too much for their own good are going to have with this movie is, like, there's so much more that it could have been. There's so much more that we wanted, but it's...
We're doing an episode on the Brian Herbert Dune book.
Oh boy.
And there are so many people that are like, no, if you just take it for what it is, it's fine. I know it's not as good as what Frank Herbert did. And I'm like, no, you're objectively wrong. It's actually just, and I feel like right now I'm sitting here being like, no, if you take it for what it is, it's just fine.
It's objectively wrong.
So I think we would both give it like a tenuous recommendation.
Yeah.
Like, there are worse ways to spend a Friday night.
If they made a sequel, I would see it. The only thing I would say for a sequel is like story aside, I just want to see what the next location's animatronics are going to look like as suits.
Good deal. All right, Shy, is there anything else you want to get on the record? Anything else you need to get out of your head?
William Afton killed his children in the original lore.
Well, I kept waiting for Vanessa to be a robot.
Well, that's implied in later games, but she's also supposed to be like a 20-something in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. Like,
I think that fits. Oh no, this
movie takes place in like the 90s.
Yeah. Okay, well, nerds, argue amongst yourselves.
Oh well.
So in the meantime, this has been a special bonus episode of Words Adjacent to Books. I'll go ahead and do a quick Patreon shout out, I guess. I'm not sure if I should do that on a bonus episode, but you know what? You deserve it. So we got John Bierce of Mage Errant series. We've got Jamie of the If You Want the Gravy movie blog. We've got Jamie Walker. Hey, Jamie. We've got Isekai Sensei Sama of That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcaster podcast. And of course, we have Spooky Chy.
I pay my husband to talk.